Hello and welcome to Lehigh Valley Passport to History's Partners Winter Program Series. This evening, we will be speaking about Black History Month in the Lehigh Valley and other regional areas. We'll be sharing tales of Valley history that will transport you back in time from the comfort of your living room from local historians. This virtual series is hosted by me, George Wacker. I encourage you to check out Lehigh Valley with Love at our Linktree link there. And I want to tell you a little bit about Lehigh Valley Passport to History before we begin. Lehigh Valley Passport to History is a partnership of historic sites and resources in and around Pennsylvania's Lehigh and Northampton counties. Let their group connect you with historical activities, events, tours, and exhibitions throughout the valley. From museums to research activities to little-known architectural gems, we're going to find some today off the beaten path. They invite you to use their website, which is lvhistory.org, and you're looking at it right now, to explore the rich heritage that is right around the corner in the Lehigh Valley. Today, for our Black History Month program, we will be speaking with Melissa Huff from the Slate Belt Heritage Center, Martha Capwell Fox from the National Canal Museum, and Tamiko Patterson, director of the Stroudsburg Little Bethel Historical Association. And without further ado, I'd like to bring in Melissa Huff. Good evening. How are you?
Fine, George. How are you?
Good. I tried to wear it's snowy out, and I'm trying to ignore it as much as possible. So it's great to see you this evening. So I want to talk a little bit before you go. I wanted to give an introduction. So Melissa from the Slate Belt Heritage Association,
Heritage Center.
I'm sorry, Heritage Center. We'll be talking about the process of researching the small local African-American community in the Slate Belt that was active from the 1890s to the 1970s. In addition, the Slate Belt Heritage Center will be publishing The African-American Experience in the Slate Belt by Jenny Dubin Rodin later this year. So, Melissa, I wanted to give it to you to tell a little bit more about the history of the African-American community in the Slate Belt.
Okay, thank you, George. About 15 years ago, the Heritage Center decided that it would collect and write up the histories of the many ethnic groups that came to form the population of the Slate Belt. And among them was the African-American community. It was never a large group of people. And it flourished between about 1890 and the 1960s to 70s. And in a way that posed a significant problem in that many of the people who were most active in the community had passed away many years ago, and many of their descendants had left the area. So that there weren't necessarily people from the community that we could talk to firsthand. We began doing oral histories, really just gathering the reminiscences of older people. And among them were stories about the African-American community. And we also had to look at small things, artifacts that might include the foundations of the Mount Bethel or Mount Zion Baptist Church, which was in East Bangor. And among those things is a remarkable painting that is in the administration building of the Bangor High School. On slate, it's a winter scene. But what's significant about it is it is really a congratulations to 6 graduates of the high school. And among them is a girl named Mary Gertrude Smith. What's significant about Mary Gertrude is that she went on to become the first African-American graduate of East Stroudsburg, what is now university, and went on to have a remarkable life. So we found bits and pieces of her life. You know, you can look at census records, they give you the skeletal story, but to add real human portions to that, we looked through a lot of newspapers from the time. We had to we tracked down some family members eventually, and found a remarkable book that was written by the family members, and found that the family had come from Virginia at the time when Jim Crow laws were being incredibly oppressive, got jobs in the slate quarries, and the men in the family worked there while Mary Gertrude was able to go to school and graduate from high school, which was remarkable in itself. Very few people did go entirely through high school in 1901. But then she enrolls at East Stroudsburg. She gets her degree. In 1904, she graduates as the first African American, and there are very congratulatory articles about her in the papers at the time. And it doesn't stop there. She marries. She meets the Reverend Charles Bodie, who was a widower with children of his own, small children. They marry. They move to New Rochelle, New York, where they grow up a congregation, have to enlarge the church, and they become leaders in the community. But then beyond that, they have children of their own. Mary Gertrude instills in them this drive to get an education and how important that is. They all go on to higher education and remarkable careers in the ministry, in law, in medicine, in civic affairs. One of them becomes a college president, and then their grandchildren go on to do similar sorts of things. What's even more remarkable is that the family, then, the grandchildren, establish a scholarship at East Stroudsburg. So her legacy continued not only through her own relatives, through her own family, but into the greater population as well. So it's a remarkable success story.
And a lot of these stories are coming from oral history.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you take that information, and do you put it against existing accounts in death records and newspapers? What do you do with oral?
Well, you have to verify, because, as I said, a lot of these things are from the memories of older people. In some cases, they were telling stories their parents had told them. So it's second and third hand information. And frankly, all of us involved are from outside the community, well-meaning, but from outside the community. So we all bring to it a certain bias. So you have to verify. You go to genealogical records. In the case of the Smith-Bodie family, there was a family book that was put out, which helped us a great deal. There were newspaper accounts that we could verify. There was one story which was very poignant about a boy named Wheat Merritt. Okay, and this was a story that came from a gentleman who was telling the story his mother had told them. As kids, they had all gone to East Bangor Dam. It was winter. They had gone home after school to collect their skates, and they went down to the dam to skate. And they did as kids before them and kids since them have done. When the ice is melted around the edge of the shore, they take a running leap and jump onto the harder ice in the center. Wheat took a leap and went right through. His friend Gilly Martin came and jumped in after him, trying to save him, and unfortunately couldn't do it. Wheat was trapped under the ice and he drowned. Now, it's a poignant story, but we went through newspapers figuring that it had to have been in the papers. And I looked at things from 1910 to 1920, thinking that was the era. Couldn't find it. And I give a shout out to Sharon Gothard, who's at the history room at the library in Easton, who took it on herself to do a lot of genealogical searches for the community in the Slate Belt. And she found Wheat Merritt. The incident happened in 1921, which was a year later than my searches. But in fact, she found his death certificate. His real name was Charles. He did die of drowning while skating and playing. It's on the death certificate, and he was only 9 years old. So it was a really sort of touching incident. Sure. But it took a lot of tracking down, from the kernel of the story to find out the details.
It's almost like detective work. I mean, you're going from speaking, you're speaking to people who may have it second, third, fourth hand, and then trying to verify it through information that's sometimes very difficult to get. Exactly.
Yeah. And it is like being a detective, which is one of the challenges of history. That's what makes it fun.
So unfortunately, we only have 30 minutes. We have two other speakers. So I want to make sure that people are aware of what's going on with the Slate Belt Heritage Center now. And you can see the slatebeltheritage.net is where you can get more information. But are there any upcoming events? Obviously, with the current situation, it's difficult for in person, but what do you have going on?
Yeah, we have monthly meetings. And in fact, Jenny will be talking about and giving a program about the book, which is upcoming, and that will start on the 18th, February 18th. Okay.
All right. Well, Melissa, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I appreciate it. Again, if we had more time, I'd love to hear more, but we are moving on. So Surely. Have a great evening. I appreciate it.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as we move on, we will be speaking with Martha Capwell Fox, a National Canal Museum historian, who will share the story. And this is really interesting until you see these pictures, and we have a video with this as well, which we're going to start off with, of Captain James Brown, who is among the last people and few African Americans to navigate the Lehigh and Delaware canals. At the age of 10, he was hired by a boat captain in his hometown of Bristol to be a mule driver. And I'd like to bring in Martha now. Martha, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. You are not Melissa. You're Martha.
No, I am Martha.
So I did want to, we had talked about this before we came on. I wanted to start with this video because it's fantastic. Do you know when, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you know when this video was taken, what year it was taken?
Yes, this was made in 1991, possibly 1990 or 1991. And Mr. Brown, Captain Brown, was 91 or nearly so when it was made.
Well, thank you for that, because I think it puts it in a little bit more perspective as we watch this video. It's about 1 minute and 10 seconds long. So this is Captain James Brown.
Bristol, from Bristol. I've seen them going through there because I live Bristol there, I seen them, I said, I'm going to ask. I like the mules. They look little to me, but they're bigger, but they look about that size. And I said, I'm going to ask him he had 2 boys about the size of me, see? And a girl. And I said, Mister, give me a job. He was on the boat. Yes. I said, when? He says, Kukalalik his name was. He was from Bristol. Kukalalik. He said, yeah. I said, when? When do you want it? I said, right now. Okay, follow them boys, them children. I followed them till I got up to foot of 11-mile level, and then I got on the boat, see. Now he said, how much you want, and what do you want? I said, I want a place to sleep and something to eat, and that's all I want. And winter time, summer and winter. Okay, he had a farm, and I lived on the farm with him, boated. Till I boated with him for a good many years, then I...
Okay, and that's where there is a longer video, but that's where it comes for us. I'm assuming it's Bristol, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, is his hometown?
Yes.
And I'll bring up some photos as you tell us a little bit more about him. It's a fascinating story, so I'm going to leave it to you.
Well, Jimmy Brown's story is really fascinating, and it's a real Huck Finn story, because what he's saying there about, going down and being by the canal and asking for a job, he was 10 years old, and he was essentially running away from home. He was unhappy at school. His mother had died when he was a baby. And his father, he mentions later in the oral histories that were done in 1981, his father was kind of neglectful and he went through a lot of women. And so Jimmy had a tough childhood. And he got put with a woman who told him that she was going to treat him the way they treated black boys down south. And remember, this was about 1909, 1910. And he didn't like that. And so he essentially ran away to go to the canal. And now it wasn't unusual for kids that young to be working on the canal. But usually they were with a parent. Like he says there, Schuylkill Elliott had those 3 kids with him were his children. And it was very generous of him to take on this little boy. He must have looked like he really needed somebody to take care of him. And so he got this job. And you notice he also said, I just want clothes and food and a place to spend the winter. And in fact, he didn't go back to Bristol until he was either 18 or 21. He gets a little vague about dates later on in his conversation that was recorded in 1981. Because he was afraid that because he was truant, he had people tell him that if he went back to Bristol, they would arrest him and they'd put him in a reform school. And he didn't want to do that. And so he would get off the boat before the boat, a southbound boat, got to Bristol. And he'd stay with the lock tender there until whoever he was working for came back north again. Bristol is the southern terminus of the Delaware Canal. And so that it was pretty difficult, I imagine, for a long time to avoid going to Bristol. But he says he managed to do that. And then in the winter, he, as a child, he did live on some of the farms that some of the boat captains had as well. So he made a living with it. And for a long time, he just, drove mules, which was children's job on the canal, more in the 19th century than in the 20th. In the 20th century, there were more men and than children because there were laws that said you had to go to school. And but he managed to avoid that.
Well, you said he went back at 18, and I saw photos of him from. It looked like he was on the canal in his older age. Did he spend time back up here in between? What did he do maybe in his life after that?
Well, it's funny because although we have 2 sets of oral history with him, and the one in 1981 is pretty extensive. If somebody asked him what he did after the canal closed in 1932, we don't know. A lot of people who worked on the canal then sort of switched to working on the railroads, and he perhaps maybe did that. He does mention that he got married in 1933, and in his later years, he lived in Lansdale, so he may have found various types of work, but he never really lived anywhere other than southeastern Pennsylvania. He wasn't. I don't think he was really comfortable up here. He talks about how the Lehigh boatmen all spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, and he didn't. Although he says he did learn to cuss in Dutch.
Did he talk at all? I mean, in my notes, I have that he is the only black person in his position. Did he speak about that? Like, what did he experience, discrimination-wise, or how did he feel?
Jimmy does. He comes off all the way through all of his conversations as being very easygoing, and he does talk about being teased. There's one funny passage in the oral history where he says somebody said to him, "How can your name be Brown when you're black?" And he said, I know white people named Black and I know black people named White. So what's in a name? And then later on, he says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me. And he really, for the most part, if there were issues about him being black, he pretty much let it roll off. And he mentions it in a number of cases when he was still a child. Some of the boatmen that he drove for, treated him like a member of the family. Particularly one captain whose name was John Free, and another one named Lichtaller. And they were people who took him in the wintertime and generally treated him like a member of the family. And then the really important part of the story with him is that when he was 15, now this also was not unusual, although in the 20th century it was probably becoming a little bit unusual. At 15, Captain John Free took him to the Lehigh Cola Navigation Office here in Easton and said to the manager of the canal there, "This guy knows what he's doing. Let him lease a boat. He can be a boat captain." And so at 15, he became a boat captain.
What do boat captains on the canal do? Is it different than a regular person would think of a boat captain?
Yeah. For one thing, you're basically by that point talking about a crew of two. I mean, the captain and the mule driver. But the boat captain was first of all responsible for the boat. Then the boat belonged either to Lehigh Cola Navigation, and in this picture, that's a Lehigh Cola Navigation boat going past the restaurant that's now the Golden Pheasant down in Bucks County. And so those boats, that was a matter of leasing a boat from the company. And then he also talks about how he captained boats for a man from Ulertown named Hackey, which I imagine was kind of more of an employment type of job rather than just being a sort of lessee of a boat. And so you were responsible for the boat. And of course, you were responsible for the cargo and delivering it on time. And so in that sense, a canal boat captain was very similar to a captain of any other kind of vessel. It was he was the man. And then he had to hire a mule driver and just simply maintain everything and get to where he was supposed to be on time and pay the tolls where necessary and everything like that.
We talked to Melissa about oral histories. How valuable is having that oral history on video? I mean,
it's astounding. And we're really fortunate because a lot of these canal boatmen lived pretty long lives. And there were people beginning in the 1960s who were realizing that this was something that really did need to be preserved. So in some cases, the quality of the recording is not all that good and the conversation wasn't steered all that well. And there's always questions, just like Melissa was saying about there's, oh my goodness, why didn't somebody ask this or that?
Yeah.
The thing about talking with Jimmy Brown is that he also has some really detailed explanations of running a boat, how the mules were harnessed, how a boat was snubbed, which is stopped, where it was hard to steer, things like that. And he also mentioned something that I don't think we've ever seen written down anywhere else, was that he actually picked up a load of stone and cement, as he says, in Lumberville. There was a quarry in Lumberville. And he took it down to Bristol and joined a tow flotilla to Philadelphia. And then from Philadelphia, he on his boat was towed with 4 other boats that were also loaded down Delaware Bay, through the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, and down to someplace on the eastern shore of Maryland where they were building a pier.
From here?
And yes, from here, from Bucks County to someplace down on the eastern shore of Maryland.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And he said he did that 4 times. So
I want to Google more. I'm so interested in this and watching the video. I think I'm going to do my own little Googling after this to learn more about it as well.
Tell us what you find out.
Well, again, it's always a shame. We should make these maybe an hour, I think, next time. There's so much fascinating information, but I want to make sure that people know what is going on at the Canal Museum, and if they can find out any more information. So what's going on now? What can you tell anybody who's interested in learning more?
Well, right now we are closed, but we are reopening. We're planning to reopen on the 3rd of April for weekends only, and then the boat will resume at some point when people don't have to be bundled up like Eskimos to be aboard the boat rides. And the season will be in full swing at the beginning of June. And you can find out about our schedule at canals.org and also on the Facebook page for the National Canal Museum.
I cannot wait to be in Hughmore Park. Just being outside, it sounds like the best thing right now. I mean, not today.
Hughmore Park. You could come to Hughmore Park right now. You could walk on the road anyway, and yeah, it's beautiful and peaceful. But you can't go too far because it's only a little plowed.
I can barely get out of my driveway, so it's okay there. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
We have one more guest, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much, Martha Capwell Fox from the National Canal Museum. I'll make sure I get her off here. We have one more guest, last but certainly not least. It's a new guest. We haven't had her on before. It's Tamiko Patterson, who is the director of the Stroudsburg Little Bethel Historical Association, which was originally established in 1855 as the first church in the area for African Americans. It closed in the 70s, but as you will see from some photos that we have, it is still standing today, and we're going to learn more about it. Tamika, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you so much for waiting. We're almost 30 minutes in. I appreciate it.
No worries.
So
I learned a lot. It was very interesting.
So did I. It's always with these, we say, hey, we want to be 30 minutes. And as I'm listening to all this stuff, I want to ask more and more questions, which I will when we're done. But let's talk about the Stroudsburg Little Bethel Historical Association. For those who are unaware, can you give us some more information about it?
Sure. So the Little Bethel Church, as you mentioned, was established initially in 1855. There was a gap in information between 1855 and 1868. So the structure that you have here on the screen, that was actually built in 1868. But prior to that, there was another structure across the street on another lot. But again, there was a gap in information. But what we do know is in 1868, the Stroudsburg Little Bethel AME Church was founded. And it was the first church in the area, not only for African Americans, but also for Native Americans. It was deeded to three, what they used to call mulattoes, so mixed race people, Samuel Huff, Ira Huff, and John Quaco. And they were all U.S. colored troops from the 22nd Regiment that relocated to the area once the war was over. And so the church went on from 1868 to 1972. And they started having a decline in membership because other churches were opening in the area, and more and more people started migrating to the area. And so in 1972, they closed their doors, and then the photo you showed previously was when the church fell into disrepair. So from 1972 to 1974, there was no activity, no services in the church. In 1974, Joseph and Justina Hall purchased the building, and their plans were to restore it and open it up as a place for disabled people. They wanted to mentor African Americans and Native Americans in the area. And unfortunately, before they could get the project off the ground and renovate the building, they passed away. So then again, the building just lay there in disrepair for many, many years. And it wasn't until 2002 when a group of people got together to form the Stroudsburg Little Bethel Historical Association. They got articles of incorporation and then started again about the work of restoring the church. So what the last photo you showed was what it looks like currently today. So we've had a lot of ebbs and flows. The churches, the roof was pretty much in bad shape and had to be totally redone. We've had a lot of board members that have come and gone. Most of them, again, unfortunately, have passed away. And I'm no spring chicken, but I'm actually the youngest one on the board today. So, but we do have a lot of interest. What else can I tell you?
Well, it's unique to me because it's right. It's on 3rd Street in Stroudsburg. It's one of those structures that you might, because of its size, you might walk by it and not really pay it much attention.
Right.
But then if you give it that look, you give it the look it deserves, and you hear this history, is that something where you kind of like open the doors and say, look how much history exists right here in this town?
Right. Yeah. So we've had a couple of open houses over the past 3 years, and that's what's happened. You know, we put an ad in the paper and the Pocono Record and say we're having an open house. People show up and they said the same thing. You know how many times I've driven past this little building and never recognized it? And that was the same for me. I had no idea. I'd driven by it hundreds of times and didn't realize it. You know, we've been, and of course, in a holding pattern because of the pandemic, but we are looking forward to getting back to work. We do, you know, need more people to get involved. I loved hearing about the historical, the oral history that the other ladies have been able to gather. We have not been able to gather a lot of that, so we are still looking for people to help us with that. And, you know, but the plan is to, you know, not reopen as a church, but as a museum and a place of worship. So that's what we're striving for. We still have a little bit of work to do, but we are looking forward to the day when we can reopen to the public.
So right now you're looking for more support, volunteers, people to get involved. And can they do that on the screen? I have is little-bethel.org. You did mention it's in construction, but they can have, there's information there for them to get in touch.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what is there, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there a plan for the museum? Are there some ideas that you guys are thinking that you would like to have inside or you're looking forward to?
Yeah, specifically, we've been asking for, you know, any kind of historical artifacts. Now, interestingly enough, there's a plaque that's in front of the church that was erected in 2013, and it was, that plaque there. The great-great-great-granddaughter of Samuel Huff, who's one of the original people that was, you know, the land was deeded to. She was the one that worked with Monroe County to get that plaque erected. And if you could zoom into it, you would see that it lists the names of all the U.S. colored troops that were in the area that were members of the church. And one of the little known facts is that Henry Box Brown, and I'll share the story quickly for those who don't know, Henry Box Brown was a slave in Virginia who he escaped from slavery by mailing himself in a box, and that's how he got the name. And he got in a box. The box was on a train, and the train came to Dansbury Depot here in East Stroudsburg. So there's some information in the archives in Philadelphia that they're not for certain, but they know he came through the area, and they believe that he was, at least visited the church. So
did he plan
Sorry.
to go to Stroudsburg, or was it just along the way?
They don't know. He just got in a box and got on a train, and wherever the train ended up, that's where he ended. He was going north, right? So
I bet the mail was a lot faster back then than it is now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So do you think, well, I mean, kind of last question, but how important is it? You talked about oral history. How important is it to preserve, again, things that some people might walk by and not give a second look to? Why is that so important to the community to preserve something like the Stroudsburg Little Bethel Church?
Right. Well, my favorite saying is, if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going, right? So we have to understand that people, African Americans and Native Americans have been in this area since the 1700s, and a lot of people don't know that. So it's important for me to understand and to make sure my children understand that, just because we moved here 10 years ago, that doesn't mean that, we didn't have, some heritage here, history here. So that's why it's important.
Well, I'm looking forward to visiting. I didn't know about it until today. And again, it's one of those things where you find out more about things that are just in your area. And it's just amazing to be able to go and visit. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. I'm going to bring everybody back in. They may or may not be ready, so we'll find out. Oh, they are? Okay. Guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for taking the time to spend it with me and to celebrate Black History Month. And I know to do this in 35 minutes is really a shame. There's so much information and there's so much to read about and learn about. So I wanted to say thank you, and on behalf of lvhistory.org, to get out there and to learn as much about your area as possible.
Thanks.
So I look forward to seeing all you guys again soon. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.